Rick, how did you find carnivore?
I didn't like journalize it, so the details are a little bit scattered, but I would say probably about 2 years ago, I was dealing with acid reflux issues. Um, like I jokingly say, I was a non-practicing vegetarian. And I realized that acid reflux and a variety of other things were really impacting me quite drastically. My stomach was just never relaxed, and I ran into keto, and that was sort of the bridge to where, the challenge with keto is trying to decide how much of certain things to allow into your diet, like vegetables, fruit, and whatever. So I ended up actually bridging from keto into strict carnivore in pursuit of what I like to call the elimination diet. And I noticed within a few months of doing a carnivore type diet that the symptoms and others simply began to disappear. For example, bloating in my stomach, um, you know, using the belt a little bit more than I normally would because there wasn't the bloating, burping, acid reflux, those things, they all just sort of began to disappear. And some of them I wasn't even aware of until my wife made some comments about them. So it was really a good experience in the standpoint of things just starting to change in my body, from really becoming more strict with more or less seafood, meat, eggs, and that type of thing. In fact, I went off to the store to buy some shirts, and with my wife, and we were starting to look at shirts that had a little bit better fit on them as opposed to someone who had, a slight amount of a bloating. So that was the gist of it. Now, about a year or so into it, going back and forth because I'm in a very very mixed culture of food, amongst friends. People invite me out to dinner or whatever, and you're just eating everything. And when I said to them I'm trying to be strictly carnivore, most of them looked at me like we don't even know what that means. So it was kind of funny. And I think the thing that was the most interesting to me over that time period, the discovery time period, was um, I just started having more energy. Morning exercise became easier, so on and so forth. But there were some times when I would go back into eating different types of foods that had a lot more vegetables. And after doing that a few times, I noticed acid reflux would come back and other things like that. Just burping. I think one of your broadcasts you talked about farting disappearing. Just different aspects of health that we don't have on a list, and we're like, wow, that's just not here anymore. So it was really a good experience, even though I wasn't what you would call a faithful carnivore during that time. But I certainly shifted away very quickly from vegetarianism. Uh, I would say the noticing all the differences was probably about a 3 month process. Um, I could get into a little bit more, but any comments or thoughts about that? I don't think I'm very unique though in my experience.
Right. So, um, I think the interesting thing is, and most carnivores experience exactly what you've just talked about,
Correct.
is how you reintroduce something and the problems come back.
Yes, and it
It's
was
just
noticeable.
almost like flipping a switch.
It's funny you say that. I like that analogy of flipping a switch. Part of my training over the last several years, I I'm certified as a hypnotherapist and NLP and all that. And one of the things that I really enjoyed doing during the process was actually thinking about what they call the concept of flipping the switch. And I've since my carnivore experience began, I also have worked with people who had food addictions and things like that. So when it comes right down to my experiences with carnivore, it was, as I jokingly tell my wife, it was a little bit hypnotic, because in hypnosis, we'll give someone a suggestion, like planting a garden or whatever. And the goal is to see if their unconscious mind will respond to it and create outcomes that they weren't necessarily consciously thinking about. And with carnivore, it was, wow, okay, the acid reflux just isn't there anymore. Or I don't have the craving for all those sweets. Just things like that that I thought I would have to handle later on, that just sort of creeped in a very loving way. It's like we say in Ericksonian hypnosis. It kind of, once the metaphors are there and the unconscious says, I like this, it just simply begins to adapt quickly. And the body says, this is really cool. I like this.
Um, yeah, so it's interesting, it how adaptable we are,
Oh, yeah.
and, like, how easy it is because we're so adaptable to be led astray. And then it's much harder to get back to, like, a baseline way of eating, So, I just spoke to someone who was talking about how you introduce some carbs, and that leads to some more carbs, and that leads to some more, and eventually you're in a position where it's like, "Oh, I'm basically back where I started," because your body just goes, I'm gonna adapt to this."
Correct. And it's interesting that you're making that comment. It's almost like something we would hear in a training session in hypnosis, sort of like, um, don't worry, as your body starts to head in the direction of a habit that's good for you, it will begin to do an adaptation process, and a lot of it will just naturally take place. And I'm still laughing in my mind as I'm sharing this story with you about when I went shopping. My wife and I went to a local store, and we were going to buy some shirts. And I normally like to buy the bigger shirts, something heavier to cover up a little bit of the bloat. And sure enough, I just I was being drawn towards the shirts that fit better. And she even made a comment about that. She's like, "This one fits really well on you." I'm like, "Yeah." And so we were making jokes about being able to tighten the belt a little bit. See, in my mind, and maybe I'm being overly dramatic here, but I don't like to say, "Wow, I see the changes." I like to see people around me say, "Oh my gosh, you have more energy," or things that we wouldn't necessarily notice about ourselves, but other people will say something and we'll say, "Wow, that's really good. I'm glad they noticed that." So for me, the carnivore diet, going back from carnivore to keto, back and forth, depending on if I was going to be going out to dinner with people or whatever the case might be. Um, it really was a fun time to just see how other people would respond to the changes. Even some members of my family, on my side, not my wife's side, would make comments like, "Well, how much fruit do you eat in a given day?" or "How much vegetable?" And my answer was, however much I feel like eating. And the more that I would fill up on some form of seafood, fish, or whatever, the more I just wouldn't have the craving for that. And so it was an interesting. Remember, my whole life. I shouldn't say my whole life. I should say the last however many years, it was more vegetarian.
Yeah. So speaking of family, is your wife doing this with you, or is she's doing her own thing and she's happy for you? How does it work out?
Um, it really depends on if we're going to go out to eat, or if we're just at home, or if we're traveling. Sometimes she just simply wants what she's used to, and sometimes, well, as soon as she saw me getting healthier and she noticed that more energy, etc. Not only did she make comments about it, but she'd be more apt to have a little bit less of, say, the noodles or the rice, for example. Um, and she'd be more apt to say, "Well, why don't you do more cooking at home for both of us?" And so, I would do that. In fact, one of the things I'm doing now, which I'm loving, is homemade yogurt, homemade ice cream, cheesecake, things like that, that I know would attract her and, even friends and family. Because I wasn't so much into desserts for a while, even though I ate them, but it wasn't like I wanted to become a gourmet chef in that area. And so I really went away from, even for example, a lot of milk in a given day, things like that. So in my mind, it came down to one major point with my wife, and that was, how can I start incorporating into our life things I know naturally she'll start to enjoy? And that's kind of where we are on the journey now. But it was really hard to make that adjustment in the beginning, because I also didn't want to feel like I was forcing something on her.
So you mentioned noodles and rice, and before you talked about cultural considerations with food. So whereabouts in the world are you?
Kind of depends on the time of the year, but my wife is Chinese, and I'm from the U.S.
You're in mainland China now?
Yeah.
Okay. So how is people are kind of skeptical or that kind of thing about the way you're eating?
Um, I don't really talk about it that much, in the sense of, I won't say to somebody, "Guess what? I'm this," because I don't think they'll understand it. And many of the people I've been around over the last couple of years, a reasonable number of foreigners, and so if I go out to dinner with someone or whatever, um, it's going to be, I'm going to be ordering the food that's predominantly fish or meat based, because I'm on the coast. So for me, um, the real conflict comes with going to a local market, for example, and being able to buy butter. That's mostly special ordered, and of course we can get that online. But when it comes to my wife, uh, the more that I feel good, look good, and such, the more relaxed she is, and the more she's more apt to eat something that I made at the house that night. One of my favorites here is bone broth. I can make the bone broth for a good price, and if I do go out and have a meal with friends or whatever, and I never walk in and say I only want to eat this. Normally, if I go out, it's sharing whatever people order, but knowing I'm going to focus more on, say, the shrimp or the fish or the meat. So yeah, it's just there's always that, I'm sure you've experienced it, that okay, I'm going to be going out with friends. What is there going to be for me to eat? So I found, don't make it obvious, just be selective.
Right. So when you're at home, what is your typical eating pattern like?
Well, when I wake up in the morning, I normally will do some form of morning exercise. And as soon as I get in, that sort of dictates to me what I want to eat. So it's kind of cool, because I can sort of trigger my body to say, "Oh, okay, we just got exercise. Let's eat something now." So in a normal morning, I'm probably going to do anywhere from 3 to 5 eggs, um, either a bacon or beef or something along those lines. Fresh homemade yogurt, um, but also some form of seafood. So maybe shrimp, leftover shrimp from yesterday, some fish. So if you were to just take a picture of my breakfast, you would think, "Oh, carnivore."
And so you're only eating that once a day, or do you have another meal?
The other meals vary, but if I'm, let's say, for example, I have a meeting at 12 o'clock, as a for instance, and then I am back home at 3 o'clock, and I have plenty of time to eat whatever. It's going to look a lot more like my breakfast than it would be if I were to meet someone, say, at an office, and they were going to offer me something to eat. So I do most of the cooking I do at my home. For example, I have the oven, and I'll do you know cooking of beef and different meats in the oven, fish in the oven, a little bit of frying. But if I'm at home, I'm it's going to look more carnivore. If I'm out, who knows?
Right. Um, yeah, so you have no inclination to go back to a vegetarian way of eating at this stage?
Um, I can't imagine it. I know for me personally that I don't know the cutoff of if I were to have one salad on Monday, how long would the acid reflux last? Because I don't really sort of test that out that much. Or if I have this much fruit, how is it going to impact my stomach? And I don't really want to know, so I don't do that much of it. Uh, my lifestyle, if I had to make a guess today, it would be retaining the breakfast and the lunch I just described to you at a pretty regular pace. That's what makes me feel the best. The only challenge I have is when I do meat, like for example, a lot of steak in the morning, I'm probably going to crash and want to rest a few hours later because the body needs to digest it. If I'm doing eggs or I'm doing, I don't know, light bacon or something, just a few strips of bacon, I'm probably going to be ready to go for an afternoon walk or some kind of exercise that will make me feel better soon after. So I have to be careful about the heavy meats that I eat in the morning, knowing that they might make me tired versus eating something heavier at night and, being able to sleep because I'm tired.
Right. So, if a friend came to you and said, "Look, I wanna give this way of eating a try. I'm willing to do it for 90 days," um, what advice or tips would you give them based on the experience you've had?
Well, I would say something that I think it's Dr. Baker who always says this. Think of it as an elimination diet. The goal is not to give up all the foods that you love that aren't specifically carnivore based. Cut back if you're having health problems and focus on um, really simplifying your diet as much as possible for at least 30 days or so. And get around the carnivore community. Watch to see how some people may have been staunch, only meat, only eggs for how many months or years, and now they've developed, they've added a few animal based, like, or not, I'm sorry, plant based things in their diet. Whatever you do, don't be so strict with yourself because you're trying to live up to some carnivore personality on YouTube. I mean, we're all so different that the worst thing you can do is set for yourself a specific goal of I'm going to be only eggs and bacon and steak for the next 90 days. Um, Go with your body, go to the doctor and get some blood tests. Go on the carnivore websites, get some blood tests and see where you're comfortable and just follow your body and see what makes you comfortable. Because if you decide I'm going to live up to this in the next 60 to 90 days and you don't, you'll feel like a failure. And we're great at setting ourselves up for failure. Oh, I'm going to be the world's greatest carnivore. I'm going to be whatever. And, when we don't get there, we feel like we failed. And then that's that encouragement unconsciously to go back to whatever. So I'd say listen to your body and treat it as an elimination diet where you won't be there forever.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's more important to be listening to your body and how it responds to what you're putting into it rather than feeling like you have to label yourself and live up to that expectation despite how you feel. Um,
Correct.
yeah. Um, so Rick, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any way of getting in contact?
The good news is I am actually preparing for myself as we speak in November a social media setup. For example, I'm going to be having a YouTube channel that's going to be offering insights on how hypnotherapy and NLP sees the addiction process. And I'm going to be probably doing more interviews with people. I've been behind the scenes for a while with this, and my wife just said just start doing more social media, and I said okay. So it's going to be fun, and it's all coming soon. I'm thankful you asked me about that. I've been working with a lot of people over the last couple of years, especially with carnivore and addictions. And the question is, how would I share that effectively? And that's the formula I'm working on right now. So more on that one in the future. Good?
Yeah, sure. In the meantime, is there an email or anywhere they can reach you?
Yeah, what I'll do is I will update you in the next day or so on some contact ways people can get a hold of me. Something that almost stopped me from the carnivore diet. And I just wrote a note on my desk. I just realized this. I totally forgot to bring this up. After I'd been on the carnivore and keto for about a year, I had some massive stomach problems. And my wife took me to the hospital, and they said that I had some kind of appendix infection. And the first thing the doctor said was, you have to stop eating these kinds of foods. And I thought, but that's kind of the carnivore diet. So immediately I thought to myself, how do I deal with this? Because I was feeling better than I'd ever felt before, but my body was changing so drastically on me that it's kind of like you jump into something and you're like, I want to just be Superman by next week, and the body says, but I can't adapt that fast, you know. So it was weird because when I got home, we agreed to make some changes. For example, more seafood. I don't remember what the exact menu was at that point, but we came to an agreement. Of course, I didn't end up needing the doctors. Everything passed, and I was out of the hospital very quickly. But it was a shocker moment that made me think: did I do something seriously wrong? Was I just, trying to be too overzealous about the diet? And when all the symptoms pretty much went away, etc., I thought to myself, wow, I can't go to extremes. I have to really listen to my body, go to the hospital more often for regular tests and all. So I just want to, I guess, to say to people an encouragement, and that is, it's such of an individual journey doing a diet change, especially vegetarian to carnivore. So, don't be surprised when your body says, "What are you doing to me?" I hear this all the time on your channel, David. That's why I love it. It's like, yeah, that's so true, especially if you're in your 40s or 50s. So be patient with yourself, because no matter how hard you try, you're going to make mistakes. And you might find yourself in the hospital if you set these goals that are not realistic for your dietary habits before, your age, maybe over exercise or too little exercise. We just have to be patient with ourselves and say, you know what, this is going to work. I just have to make sure that I do what my body says is good for me, and that was the main lesson I got from that. But Dave, I've been in great health most of my life, and I got to tell you, when they told me I had problems like that, it was really it was one of those moments where you thought, what did I do wrong?
So, Rick, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I'm happy to get here. The irony in all this was I wanted to do an interview a little bit earlier, but I'd had so many roller coaster rides in my life, especially with trying to balance different diets. I thought I want to kind of be a finished product, and my wife laughed at me and said, "You'll never be a finished product." So I thought, it's just time to go out there and share and hear back from other people, and even start being more of a help to the community, especially as it relates to food addiction. So cool.